World War II pushed engineering to the breaking point, birthing 5 machines that defied physics. We're talking 500-mile-per-hour beasts that represented the absolute limit of what a propeller could do. Before jets took over, these were the kings of the sky. Welcome to the 5 fastest piston fighters in history. The war was ending, but Grumman wasn't finished. The F-8F Bearcat roared into existence like some kind of caged animal finally set free. Compact, furious, and built for one thing: murdering enemy fighters before they knew what hit them. Coming in at 455 miles per hour, the Bearcat holds our 5th spot, but don't let that ranking fool you. This fighter could climb to 10,000 feet in under 95 seconds. Think about that. While you're listening to this sentence, a Bearcat could have been halfway to bomber altitude, engines screaming, guns loaded. So what made it so fast? First, radical weight reduction. Grumman's engineers obsessed over every ounce. They stripped away everything that wasn't essential for killing. And the result? A fighter that weighed barely 7,000 pounds empty. That's lighter than most modern SUVs, but packing a 2,100 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine, the same powerhouse that drove the Thunderbolt and the Corsair. Second, that huge propeller, 13 feet 4 inches of whirring menace. The Bearcat's prop was so large it required one very special design feature. The landing gear had to be taller just to give it ground clearance. That giant blade grabbed air like nothing else, converting raw horsepower into blistering acceleration. Third, aerodynamic perfection in miniature. The Bearcat had the smallest airframe the Navy could build around that monster engine. Less drag, less weight, more speed. Pure aggression wrapped in aluminum. The Bearcat arrived too late to see combat in the Second World War, but its design philosophy proved something important. When you combine overwhelming power with minimum mass, you don't just build a fast fighter, you build a predator. But 455 miles per hour was just the beginning. Our next aircraft pushed even harder. Germany was bleeding. The Luftwaffe was dying. And in that desperation, something quite extraordinary was created by Kurt Tank, a high-altitude killer that could hunt American bombers where the air was so thin, most fighters couldn't even function. Coming in at number 4, the TA-152H screamed through the stratosphere at 469 miles per hour, but that speed doesn't tell the full story. This wasn't just fast, this was fast at 41,000 feet, where the atmosphere is so thin you can see the curve of the Earth. How did they do it? First, the Junkers Umo 213E engine with MW50 boost. This wasn't your standard power plant. German engineers developed a methanol water injection system that supercharged the engine at high altitude. When a TA-152 pilot pushed that boost, the engine delivered 2,050 horsepower, force-feeding the cylinders with an oxygen-enriched mixture. The result? Sustained high-speed performance, where Allied fighters were gasping for air. Second, the huge wings. At a span of almost 48 feet, the TA-152H's wings weren't just big, they were specifically engineered for performance in thin air. While other fighters lost lift at extreme altitude, the TA-152 kept control, speed, and deadly effectiveness. Those wings meant life or death at 40,000 feet. Third, pressurized cockpit. Most fighters forced their pilots to wear oxygen masks and suffer in freezing conditions. The TA-152H cocooned its pilot in a pressurized environment, keeping him sharp, warm, and lethal during extended high-altitude missions. Only about 43 TA-152Hs were ever deployed to operational units, but those that did proved terrifying. On April 14, 1945, Oberfeldwebel Willy Reschke encountered 4 P-51 Mustangs at high altitude. He shot down 2. The Americans never saw him coming. He was simply too fast, too high, too lethal. But if the TA-152 was a high-altitude assassin, then our next fighter was a low-level monster built for pure, brutal speed. They called the standard P-47 the Jug, 7 tons of armored fury that could absorb punishment like nothing else. But when German V-1 flying bombs started terrorizing London, and the Luftwaffe's new jets threatened Allied bomber streams, Republic Aviation stripped away the armor, cranked up the boost, and created a predator, the P-47M. Our third place goes to the P-47M at 472 miles per hour. This wasn't the forgiving, survivable Thunderbolt pilots loved. This was a race car with guns. What made it so terribly fast? First, the Pratt & Whitney R2800-57C engine is running at war emergency power. Standard P-47s were fast. The M model was violent. Engineers pushed the R2800 to produce 2,800 horsepower with water injection. That's the equivalent of 4 modern Corvette engines screaming inside a single cowling. The supercharger force-fed that engine at unprecedented boost levels, and the result was acceleration that pinned pilots into their seats. Second, the paddle blade propeller. This wasn't the standard prop. The P-47M used a specially designed 4-blade Curtiss electric propeller with wider, more aggressive blades. These paddle blades bit into the air with such efficiency that they could convert that massive horsepower into forward thrust with minimal loss. The difference was measurable and deadly. Third, weight reduction and aerodynamic refinement. Republic's engineers shaved weight wherever possible and cleaned up the airframe. Every rivet, every panel gap, every unnecessary pound, gone. The M model wasn't just powerful, it was efficient with that power. Only 130 P-47Ms ever entered service, being assigned exclusively to the 56th Fighter Group, the only unit deemed skilled enough to handle such an unforgiving beast. And they needed every ounce of that speed. January 1st, 1945. Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's last big offensive. Hundreds of German fighters swarmed Allied airfields at dawn, but the 56th Fighter Group's P-47Ms intercepted them, and speed proved to be the decisive advantage of the Thunderbolts. They bounced German formations before they could scatter, turning what should have been a devastating surprise attack into a turkey shoot. But there was something even quicker prowling the skies, and it came from the most unlikely source. Germany was losing. Their cities were burning. Allied bombers flew with impunity. And in that chaos, Dornier created something that looked like it came from another decade entirely. A push-pull twin-engine fighter so unconventional, so radical, that even today it looks futuristic. Coming in at number 2 is the DO-335 File, the Arrow, which cut through the air at 474 miles per hour. And it did something no single-seat fighter had ever done before. It mounted 2 engines in tandem, one pulling, one pushing, eliminating the asymmetric thrust that crippled traditional twin-engine fighters. How did this odd configuration produce such disastrous velocity? First, dual Daimler-Benz DB603 engines, delivering a combined 3,600 horsepower. Most fighters had one engine. The File had 2, but with none of the drag penalties of wing-mounted engines. The front engine pulled the aircraft through the air conventionally. The rear engine, mounted behind the cockpit, drove a pusher propeller at the tail. The result? Twice the power, with minimal drag increase. Second, sleek, streamlined fuselage. Without wing-mounted engines to disturb airflow, Dornier's designers created one of the most aerodynamically clean fighters of the entire war. The File's fuselage was long, narrow, and optimized for speed. Air flowed over it like water over a blade. The File's fuselage was long, narrow, and optimized for speed. Air flowed over it like water over a blade. Third, the ejection seat. Here's where it gets wild. With a pusher propeller spinning directly behind the cockpit, a conventional bailout meant instant death. You'd be shredded by your own aircraft. So Dornier engineers invented one of the first operational ejection seats. When a pilot pulled the handle, explosive bolts blew off the tail section and rear propeller. Then the seat rocketed him clear. Innovation born from necessity. The DO-335 was fast, heavily armed, and genuinely terrifying. But Germany's collapsing infrastructure meant only about 37 were ever built. The few which flew proved nearly impossible to intercept. They could outrun everything the Allies threw at them. But there was one Allied fighter that could have caught them. One final monster that represented the absolute pinnacle of piston fighter design. At 487 miles per hour, the P-51H Mustang claims our crown. This wasn't just the fastest piston fighter of World War II. This was the purest expression of what happens when you take an already legendary design and push it beyond every limit. The standard P-51D was already a masterpiece, the long-range escort fighter that allowed Allied bombers to strike deep into Germany with impunity. But North American aviation looked at that masterpiece and asked one simple question: what if we made it faster? The answer was the H model, and it was extraordinary. First, weight reduction bordering on obsession. Engineers stripped 1,700 pounds from the airframe. They redesigned the fuselage structure using lighter materials. They reduced fuel capacity slightly. They removed armor. The P-51H weighed just 9,500 pounds, loaded, hundreds of pounds lighter than the D model. Every ounce saved translates directly into speed and climb rate. Second, the Packard V1650-9 engine made what was essentially a Rolls-Royce Merlin on steroids. This power plant produced 2,218 horsepower with water injection. But more importantly, it produced that power efficiently at the speeds where it mattered most. The supercharger of the engine was optimized for high-speed performance, maintaining power output even as the aircraft accelerated toward 500 miles per hour. Third, aerodynamic refinement everywhere. The H model featured a taller vertical stabilizer for better high-speed control. The canopy was modified for reduced drag. Panel gaps were minimized. The entire airframe was smoothed, polished, and perfected. This wasn't just evolution, this was revolution. The P-51H could climb to 20,000 feet in just over 5 minutes. It could turn inside aircraft that had previously outmaneuvered the standard Mustang. And it could run down anything in the sky. But here's the cruel irony. The P-51H arrived too late. By the time these ultimate Mustangs reached operational units in the Pacific, Japan was weeks away from surrender. The fighter that could have dominated the final year of the war barely saw combat. Yet, its legacy lives on. The P-51H proved what was possible when brilliant engineering met desperate necessity. It showed that the piston fighter, that roaring, violent marriage of propeller and engine, could be pushed to speeds which seemed impossible just years earlier. These 5 fighters were the absolute zenith of piston fighter design. The Bearcat, the TA-152H, the P-47M, the DO-335 File, and the P-51H Mustang. They were born in the crucible of total war, engineered by brilliant minds working under impossible pressure, flown by pilots who needed every ounce of speed just to survive. They pushed propeller technology to its breaking point. Any faster, and the propeller tips would have exceeded the speed of sound, creating shock waves that destroyed efficiency and control. These aircraft lived right at that edge, right where physics starts saying no more. Then, World War II ended, jets took over, and these monsters of speed vanished into history, their howling engines silenced forever. But for a brief, violent moment, they ruled the skies as the fastest fighters ever built, aircraft so quick they could vanish from enemy gun sights before the trigger was even pulled. If that deep dive into aviation history got your adrenaline pumping, hit that like button, share with fellow aviation enthusiasts, and subscribe for more legendary aircraft stories. Which of these 5 do you think was the true king of speed? Drop your answer in the comments.